by joining us, brought to you by Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing. All right, so in the end, Albert, what was the market for Wentz? What was it beyond the Colts?
I mean, it wasn't very strong. You know, the Bears were in, but I think the Carson Wentz desire to go to Indianapolis was pretty clear the whole time. And it's for common sense reasons, Colin. If you look at it, really, if you look at the two front offices, the two coaching staffs, we know Chris Ballard and Frank Reich are going to be there for the foreseeable future in Indianapolis. We can't say that about Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace in Chicago. The offensive line in Indianapolis is excellent. Not so in Chicago. The Bears' number one receiver is a free agent, Allen Robinson. You know, you look at the Colts situation, young, ascending skill players like Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. And so ultimately, I think those were the two teams that were in it near the end. And, I think if you're the Bears and you look at this and you say, okay, we're going to have to take on $47 million over the next 2 years, $40 million of which is fully guaranteed, and give up draft capital, and the guy doesn't want to come here, we really got to think long and hard about that. And so I think Wentz did play his leverage to some point here, making it very clear that he wanted to be a Colt. And again, he wanted to be a Colt for some very common sense reasons.
It's interesting. They won 11 games with Phillip Rivers, and Phillip Rivers marched up and down the field in Buffalo. I mean, they just kept moving the ball down the field. It's going to be interesting with Wentz because he's been banged up with injuries, and you don't want to move him too much. But I've got to believe Frank Reich looks and thinks, I got a quarterback that can actually roll out. Do you think, will your gut feeling on how long before Wentz looks like the Wentz you and I both think he probably is?
I have no idea. I mean, I honestly, the tape was so bad in 2020. There's a lot they have to work past here. He's been hurt a lot. He didn't take hard coaching very well in Philadelphia. There are some people who've been around him who feel like he needs that, and maybe Frank Reich will give it to him. But I think it's very hard to predict whether or not he's going to wind up, being the guy that he was, in 2016 and 2017 in Philadelphia, or is he Robert Griffin, where he flashed a lot early and the scheme really helped him, and then he had to learn how to counterpunch and evolve as a quarterback, and he couldn't do it. That part's on him. So you got the perfect situation now. You're going and playing behind a very good offensive line, great team builders, a very, very well put together roster full of ascending young players, and you got the coach you want. You got Frank Reich. You got Press Taylor as your pass game coordinator, the guy who you were very close to in Philadelphia. Now it's sort of on Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you whether or not it's fixable. I mean, most NFL people you talk to aren't sure if it's fixable. But I think that if you're talking about the best situation for it to get fixed, Carson Wentz is in it right now.
All right, couple other things. Kevin Colbert came out and said Big Ben's a Steeler right now, which is what Les Snead said a week before he traded Jared Goff. Listen, they're kind of trapped in cap space hell with Big Ben, but it did offer a sign that it feels like Pittsburgh's sort of done caving to Big Ben. That's what it felt like to me. What did it feel like to you?
Yeah, I did get that feeling. They've obviously committed a lot of money to him, and in the past we've seen them kind of hold on to older veterans and let them age out, and they've paid the financial repercussions for those sorts of things in the past. So you do wonder if there's a little bit of a negotiating tactic going on here where it's Ben, you may not have many options out there if it's not here, so you need to play ball with us. And I don't think, given Ben's history, that he's going to give up much at the negotiating table either. So that sort of feels like that's where we're at now, too. I think the other thing you need to pay attention to here also, Colin, I think a lot of teams are looking at it this year and looking at the guys who are going to be available in the draft, guys obviously like Trevor Lawrence, but Justin Fields and Zach Wilson and Trey Lance. They're looking at some of the veteran quarterbacks who could be available. Obviously, Carson Wentz just went. There are going to be guys like Sam Darnold and Marcus Mariota that could be out there. And then they're looking past that to 2022. Not a ton of guys that have the promise to be first rounders in the draft next year. The free agent class in 2022 doesn't look great. I think there are a lot of teams that are looking at this and saying, if we're going to do something at the quarterback position, it might need to be right now.
Yeah.
And you sort of wonder if the Steelers are sort of considering that as well, where if we don't move on from Ben now, we are going to move on from him after next year. And if we do that, what sorts of answers are we left with?
So I think J.J. Watt and the Packers feels good, but in the reality is there's a lot of leak stuff right now, and J.J. Watt has a brand. He may be the only NFL defensive player that currently has a brand, and when stuff starts leaking, it's because somebody wants it leaked, and I think I think he is throwing it out there to the market, and he's going to social, and the wild, it's crazy. And the Packers don't get into bidding wars, Albert. This is not what they do. Like, when I see all this press and all these leaks, I'm like, oh, this isn't good for Green Bay, is it?
Well, and it's interesting because I think the two places he wants to go have cap issues, and that's Green Bay and Pittsburgh, and obviously his brothers are in Pittsburgh. He's got the emotional ties to Green Bay. They're both contenders. They check a lot of boxes. But both of those teams, as it stands right now, look like they're going to be over the salary cap for 2021. So they'd have some work to do to make space for him. And then, you look at teams like in Indianapolis, like a Buffalo, like a Tennessee that have healthier cap situations where maybe those teams would be more prepared to give him money right now. And so I think part of this for J.J. Watt's going to be, how patient can you be? Right now, there's no guarantee the cap is going to be any higher than $180 million. Now, if the television deals get done, maybe that's $10 or $15 million higher. Maybe that loosens up some money, and some of those teams can spend a little bit more, teams like Green Bay and Pittsburgh. But as it stands right now, those teams are sort of strapped to the cap. And if you're JJ, you have to look at it and say, do I go for more money to place X or Y that maybe I'd rather, that isn't at the top of my list? Or do I want to go to spot A or B where they are going to be able to spend money on me and maybe put a few more pieces around me? It's just complicated, and a lot of player situations are complicated right now by the dynamics of the salary cap.
By the way, just quick 30-second answer. Jalen Hurts. Let's circle back to Wentz. Is Jalen Hurts the answer for Philadelphia long-term, in your opinion?
Right now, he's their answer for the next 2 months. I think he'll be their quarterback. I think they're going to do all of the work that they need to do on the quarterbacks that might be available to them with the 6th overall pick. So I'd expect them to go through the full process with Justin Fields, Trey Lance, and Zach Wilson.
Okay, good stuff. Albert Breer, Monday morning quarterback on late notice, jumped on our show. We appreciate that. And great talking to you, man.
All right, thanks, Colin.